Hey guys, it's Drea. So today I have an idea. It's been floating around in my head for a really long time and I kind of figured out a way to fine tune it. I am super excited to film this. This is all about my favorite 4 shades in every palette. I'm not going to show you every palette I own, that would take forever, but I'm going to show you 10. I originally had this idea back when I got this palette. This is the Sephora Pro Editorial 2. And I had this idea to do a look with every single quad in this palette. Now, I'm not talking just like every, like this. I thought it'd be fun to go like, okay, here's 4, make a look with that. Then go to these 4 and make a look with that. And then go to these 4 and make a look with that. You know, like down here and just keep going and how many possible combinations there would be. Ultimately, I haven't even done one because I just haven't had the time. But it got me thinking about if I could only have 4 shades in each palette and make my perfect quad from each of these palettes, which 4 shades would I pick? And so I'm super excited. I spent last night swatching. There was one tragedy I'll show you, but I spent last night swatching and kind of getting ready and getting super inspired to do this. So let's jump into it. Let's start with this Sephora Pro Editorial palette. I think this palette has some really interesting combinations of 4 like already laid out. So one of my favorite combinations of 4 in this palette is these 4 right here. So these shades are Chant, Spellbound, Omen, and Sage, and I think these 4 together would make the most beautiful fall look ever. Don't you think? I haven't done it yet, but I'm super inspired to do that. When I was watching this palette last night and I was thinking, okay, which 4 would I reach for? Which are my 4 that I would create a look from, like if I just had to start? And the first color I zone in on is this orange right here. I think this orange is absolutely beautiful. It's the shade Synergy, which is a really nice bright matte orange. It's almost more of a corally orange than anything else. And then the next shade I zone in on is the shade Fairy because, surprise, it's purple. It's a nice bright shimmery purple. I think it's so pretty and so pretty in combination with Synergy. And then the next shade I zone in on is Illusion, which is another one of those shimmery purples. And I think this would make such a cool look. Now this shade Illusion really requires a base underneath it. You can kind of see when I move it that it is a duochrome blue to purple, which is so pretty, and a lot of companies have this kind of shade, but you can also tell that this is super sheer. And this really requires a base, either like a white base to make it pop, or just even like a tacky base, like a glitter glue can sometimes give you that effect as well. So it really does need that, but I think those 3 together are super pretty. And then the last thing that I would really add in is the shade Cloak, which is just like a really cool toned, muted brownish shade. And I just think that looks like it just rounds out that quad so well. I love these 4 in combination together. And I don't know if I'm going to film an actual look using those other 4 shades that I talked about, but if I do, I'll put it on Instagram, and or maybe I'll just like take pictures of the end result on Instagram and you guys can go look and see, because I think those 4 like greenish fall shades together are gonna look so gorgeous. I wanted to show you a few of the palettes that have been hanging around in my everyday makeup drawer, because that's also kind of why I had this idea, is I've been reaching for some of these and going for the same shades over and over. Speaking of what is on my face, so I wanted to use this palette today. This is the BH Cosmetics Hanging in Hawaii palette. This is fairly new to them. It's no secret that I absolutely adore BH quality in terms of their eyeshadows, and this palette is blowing me away. This palette is just like, I would pay $50 for this palette and it's only like a $14 palette. It's that good. Like, this stands up to some of the most high-end eyeshadows that I've ever tried. And it has a lot to do with these like really intensely metallic, they're almost like molten metal shades, and then the nice soft mattes that you have all over. Like, you might look at this palette at first and think that is so neutral, like what's so impressive about it? But these pinky shades are so lovely and so soft, and you can do such a nice like soft romantic look with them. You can really warm up a look with the orange shades, and even though they're similar, they actually are a little bit different in terms of how much depth you can get from them. And then you have like a nice variety of matte browns in here, not just like 1 or 2. You have quite a few to like do whatever kind of depth that you want. So my favorite 4 shades in this palette, and one that if I had like a quad only from this palette, would be this shade here, which is the shade Shaka, this shade here, which is the shade Hula, Paradise, which is this really nice like deep matte pink. And then this shade here, Hibiscus, which is just like a really nice warm orange. So here's these 4 shades swatched together, and these are the 4 that I have on my eyes today. So as you can tell, if you look at my crease, like you might not have initially noticed that it has a pinkish tone. You might have, but you can kind of tell, like this is very heavily swatched, but it's very kind of lightly made romantic, I think, in this look that I've made today. And then there's that element of warmth above that a little bit as a transition. On my lid, this shade here, what was it called again? Oh no, that's the shade Pineapple. Sorry, I said Shaka, but I was looking at the wrong one. This is actually the shade Pineapple. I'm sorry, guys. So this is what is on my lid, kind of from the 3rd outward. And then on the inside of my eyelid is Huda. Now, the reason I love this is because it is the most intense kind of pop in the middle, and then it kind of fades a little bit out. But the reason it's so intensely popping is because I put a little bit of a sticky base under it, which is the BH Cosmetics Base Booster, and I actually love this. This is a super good glitter glue, but it's also good for just putting under like metallic shadows to get them to pop a little bit, and it almost gives the illusion of like a soft cut crease, and I really love this look. I wore this exact look the other day, and it looked even better after 13 hours of wearing it at work than it did when I first put it on. Like the shadows almost like melded more, if that makes sense, but the metallic on my eyes was just so gorgeous by the end of the day, and I loved it, and it makes me want to reach for this palette over and over and over. Like I don't even want to take this out of my everyday makeup drawer. I'm obsessed with this lately. Okay, next palette is one I've been using a lot lately as well. My friend Lisa gave me. This is the Huda Beauty Desert Dusk palette. This palette and its tones are very much like right up my alley. The purples, those like intense duochrome, the oranges, the nice like warmth of this palette, but it's more depth and more drama than a lot of other things. And I wore a look just yesterday that I thought was stunning, and I was super happy with the way it wore, super happy with the way it looked. And I might have footage from when I did my everyday, like my every lip of the day. If I do, I'll insert that. My favorite 4 shades from this palette, if I could only have 4 and make a quad from it, I really like the shade Eden. This is an absolutely perfect transition shade. It has a little bit more depth than just being my skin tone, so it's a little bit deeper, but it's that lovely like warm peachiness to it. This shade here, which is called Amethyst, now this does require a lot of building up. I've swatched this right here 3 times. So one swatch of it is really kind of light, you can see, and these shadows do require a little bit more building up, I've noticed over using it the last couple weeks, but it still is able to be built up really well. So I like the way this ends up looking on my eye, the shade Amethyst. This is the shade Twilight, which again, super lovely, kind of duochrome purple sparkliness. Again, this is just a trick that I've learned that just makes these shadows pop so well. A sticky base just makes this pop so nicely. Okay, next is this. This is one of my favorite palettes of all time. It might even be my favorite palette of all time. This is the BH Cosmetics Weekend Festival palette, the original from 2018. And last year when I got this, I couldn't put it away. I was obsessed with it. It lived in my drawer all summer long, and I couldn't stop using it. This is one of my favorite palettes ever. I already said that, but it is. Okay, so going into this palette, there's so many choices. One of my favorite things to do with this palette is do a super simple peach eye, and I've actually done a tutorial on that on my channel, so I will link to that video. And it's mostly using like Hippie, Candy, and I think Electric are the base of that look, and those 3 shadows together make the most beautiful peachy eye. It's so gorgeous. But one of my favorite things to do with this palette is use these 2 colors in conjunction, and you might be like, what? But these 2 make a gorgeous halo eye. So I'll often take Wicked and put it like on either side, and then take Ultimate and put it right in the middle and make this halo eye, and they look so beautiful together. So this is just one swatch, no base. That's what these shadows are capable of. Like, look at how intense that is in just one swatch. So those are 2 of my favorite colors in this palette. I would definitely go for probably Electric, which is more of the pinky matte in this palette as opposed to the orange matte. And the reason is, like, that might look very kindergarten altogether, but this like lightly feathered through the crease just to give it a little bit of a warmth, I think would look really good with these two. And that probably, like, I'm trying to think back of what I have used, and I think that's probably what I have done. And then if I was going to create an actual quad, I would include Swag, which is a really nice, like, look, that's a matte purple. Like, compare that to the Huda palette, that's one swatch. Now, these are a little powdery, okay? So they're gonna have a lot of kickback, but that's one swatch of Swag. And I'm a matte purple connoisseur, kind of, I like to think. And I think that one stands up to so many that I've tried. And for it to just be a random color in like a $14 palette, is that how much I paid for this? No more than 20, I'm sure, is just super impressive. So those are my favorite 4 in the Weekend Festival of palette. This next palette kind of met a tragic fate last night when I was swatching, and I tried to fix it, but I don't think I really was very successful. And I love this palette so much that I might just repurchase it because I did this to it. This is the Too Faced Tickled Peach palette. It's a little mini palette. It is so cute. It smells really intensely of peaches. It's super warm. Last night I dropped it on the floor and I smashed this color right here. And I tried to repress it, but I did a horrible job. And I kind of swatched it this morning, and I can tell just by swatching it's not swatching the same as it usually does. But that being said, I'm still going to include it here because I love this so much. Like, you know, if I say I'm going to go repurchase a palette just because one shade is messed up, you know I love it. This is the palette I was wearing in my BIB sale recommendations video, and I had a lady literally stop me on the street that day. Like, I filmed, I went out, stop me on the street and demand to know what was on my eyes. That's how gorgeous this was. So this palette, if I had to pick 4, because I think there's a lot of really goodness going on in here. If I had to pick 4, it would definitely be this matte brown, which is so intensely rich. This is the shade Love Pit. Normally this swatch is super smooth and super deep and super rich, but it's kind of looking a little patchy after I messed with it. But I think the color, you can still kind of get an idea of what that color looks like. And I would include this transition shade right here. I think this is an absolutely perfect transition shade, and I usually use it in every look I do with this palette. And that shade is the shade Peach Spice. And then my 2 favorite shimmers in here are this shade right here, which is called Tickled. It's the more peachy shimmer shade in this palette. And then this one here, which is called Peachy Swear. So that is what those 4 look like. Look at this. I love putting this like all over the lid and then putting a little bit of that kind of mixed in with it. But these 4 together and deepening up the outer V with this brown just makes the most like smoky, vampy, but like warm metallic look ever, and it's so beautiful. Okay, next let's do a Colourpop palette, because Colourpop makes my absolute favorite eyeshadows of all time. I think BH is like next in line, and these are so affordable. So for them to take the top of the list, like, just tells you about the quality. I want to include this palette. I really love this. This is the It's My Pleasure palette. I haven't use this too much. I haven't done too much in the way of like figuring out what combinations I like the best, but I did want to still include this because I've done a few looks with it that I really liked. And when I was watching this last night thinking, okay, which ones would I actually make a look from that I would really love? Surprisingly, I left out this really intense purple. The 4 that I really like to use the most, this one for sure, Mr. Sandman. It's amazing. This is just so stunning. If you remember how much I like Glass Bull, the first time I swatched this, I think I described it as being like Glass Bull's older, meaner sister. Like, it just has that quality, but so much more intense, and I think it's incredible. The next shade I would include is Do or Dough. I think this is just like a really pretty shimmery purple. It's not bothering anybody. It's just hanging out being like, hey, I'm purple, like, look at me. So I really like that one a lot. This shade Earth Shine in the middle, I think I would probably include this as well, even though now we have 3 shimmers instead of like a balance of matte and shimmers. but it is still got that really pretty like purple blue duochrome shifty shininess that obviously I've kind of mentioned a few times in this video that I really gravitate towards. And then because I definitely want a matte in here, it's really hard for me to kind of decide, would I just want like a nice mid-tone mauve-y matte pink, or would I want the deeper shade? I think ultimately though I would go for that mauve-y pink. This is called Fanfiction, and that's just because you're getting so much drama with these other three. I don't think you necessarily need to like deepen up the crease to get the drama, although that would be lovely in a lot of cases. This throughout the crease and then one of these or two of these in combination all over the lid, I think would be just beautiful on its own, and you don't really need that deeper color, but I think that this would go really well with all three of these. The next palette, one of my favorites of all time as well. This is the Yes Please palette from Colourpop. When I use this in the summer, it's another one that I have a very difficult time putting back, and I might not. I might just have this live in my drawer all summer long, just like the Weekend Festival palette. This palette, you can tell, well used, well loved, lots of usage on it. I adore it. It's so warm. It's just, this is the epitome of warm palettes. If you want a warm palette, this is your girl. Just go for it. You won't regret it. You'll love it forever. The first shade that I always gravitate towards is the yellow. Like, I want to use that in every look. I don't know why. It just is. You can't argue with it. This is just such a nice, beautiful matte yellow. That shade is called Mischief. The next shade that I would go to all over my lid usually is this shade here, which is called Buttercake. Usually this will be the kind of look, my go-to look with this is where I deepen up the outer V with a very dark shade and I get that intense drama. Holy cow, look at that. And then lastly, I'll probably warm up the crease either with this shade or with this shade. Really hard for me to choose, but ultimately I usually go for the more orangey shades, and this shade is called Big Cocktails. And that is what that quad looks like. Just super warm, super beautiful. This makes me think of summer nights, you know, just that like you could be on a beach, but like it's drama. It's like, here I am, I'm sex personified, kind of. Like, I don't know, it just gives me that vibe. I love these four shades together. This is a fairly new palette to my collection. This is the Lime Crime Venus palette. I'm very late to the game with Lime Crime eyeshadows, but I am loving them. I think the quality of Lime Crime is so beautiful. This palette here is already only 8 shades, so it's kind of like, which 4 do you cut? Like, it kind of is very cohesive by itself anyway, but when I use this palette, I always gravitate towards these 2 shades right here. So this one through the crease and this one all over the lid usually. And those are the shades Shell and Rebirth. And the mattes from Lime Crime, like very similar to Colourpop in the intensity of pigment. They don't require building up, and they're just super beautiful. Like, there's those shades there. And then again, if I'm creating a quad from these 8, I would want a light shade and a dark shade. And so I would go for this one here and this one here. And again, look at the quality of these. So these are the shades Aura and Muse. I love how rich these are. Like, look at that shade there. So just kind of like editing this palette down even further into a quad can get you the most beautiful 4 shades together. And I really love this palette. I really love the quality of it. I think it's so good. But those 4 shades I think are so pretty. Okay, one more Colourpop palette and then I'll move on to a different brand. But Colourpop is my favorite, so I'm not gonna apologize if there's 3 here. This palette here is the Colourpop times Shayla Perception palette. I think this is surprisingly gorgeous. This is the kind of palette that didn't necessarily scream to me right off the bat when they released it, but when I got it and I started using it, I just became super impressed with everything in it. One of my favorite things to do with this palette is literally just to use this line. This line right here makes the most stunning look. These metallics in here are some of the best metallics that I've ever tried. These make such a beautiful look, and it's kind of a go-to. So are these, to be honest. Like, if you just look at a palette sometimes and you don't know what to do with it because it looks so intense, try zoning in either on one line, or like one quad, because often they're designed that way. So block everything else out, even take like a piece of paper or a book and just like block out some of it, you know? And just go like, oh, those 4 shades right there would make such a beautiful look. And actually those 4 shades would make an intensely deep, beautiful look. But anyways, that's just a fun way to get new ideas, I think. But if I had to pick 4 shades from this palette, it's tough because like sometimes I just want to use this green. This green is so pretty. Look at that. So pretty, but that's not necessarily a shade that I would go to over and over. One shade that I really love in this palette, and actually was the first shade I created a look with, is this really deep brown that has sparkles in it. The name of the shade is Shade, and I really like it. I don't know if you're gonna be able to tell, but you can actually see the sparkles. Oh, maybe you can tell there. You can actually see the sparkles sparkle in this deep brown, and it's so pretty. It's got this kind of almost burgundy brown quality to it. I don't know, there's something very special about this one. I would also have to include one of these 4. It's really hard for me to narrow down, but I would probably go for this one or this one. I have to re-swatch them because even though I was swatching everything last night to like narrow things down, it's hard to remember. Those 2 are very similar. I think that if I'm gonna curate a quad here, to go with this, I think this shade is a little bit more kind of something that would work with it. So that is the shade Strut and Stray, which is super pretty. Next I would do probably this matte here, which is just a little bit more intense. And this is the shade Revenge. And then the last one I would do is just like the perfect, again, transition, which is this one here, and it's called Culture. And that's those 4 there, and it's just such a really pretty like warm quad. The last palette I wanted to do is this one. I really love this palette. This is the Makeup Revolution Emily Noel The Wants palette. I used this a ton when I first got it. Like I couldn't put it down, I couldn't put it away. I did such nice looks with like these warm burgundies. Just like really, they turned out so beautiful. This palette is hit and miss. I've talked about it before. There's a few shades in here that just don't really perform very well, but there's a lot of shades that really perform really well. And some of the best performing shades in this palette are all the greens. And I did a look with 4 of these green shades, actually probably 3 of them in a transition, that turned out so gorgeous. I was blown away. It was around Christmas time too, and it just was the most pretty Christmassy like green look. So the 4 shades I'm talking about here are Corduroy, Grateful, yeah, I'm reading them upside down in my mirror, Side Hustle, and Midwest. Midwest is just this really nice like medium brown that works so well in so many looks, and I found myself reaching for that over and over. That's one of the shades that blends super duper well. So here's the 4 here, and I will say these greens I did swatch like 2 or 3 times for some of them just to build them up, but that is the thing about this palette, that they do build up really well. So you have to build them up, but they build up really well and they blend really well. A lot of them, there are a few shades in here like I said that don't, but it's not, definitely not the majority of the palette, very minority of the palette, but a lot of them do require building up. I love these 4 together, and kind of when you layer this shade, which is Grateful, over this shade of Side Hustle, like kind of blend them together, they really just melt into each other really nicely. And I think like for a green look, it's such a nice go-to, these shades in this palette, and it turned out super beautiful. Okay, that's 10 guys. That's 10 palettes out of my collection. I can definitely do this video again if you like it, because I have so many palettes. I can definitely hone in on some more palettes and create quads with them. But I hope that maybe some of you that make videos or even have Instagrams might kind of take a liking to this idea, because I think it's so fun. It's almost like when you reach for a palette, what do you go to? What is a look that you can make from it? And it's just kind of fun to get other people's perspectives. A lot of us have a go-to look or a go-to kind of way we put our eyeshadow on, so it might be different from one person to another, and I think it would be super fun to kind of get other people's ideas. But if you do want to see another version of this with other palettes, let me know in the comments below. Other than that, I hope you're having a great day. I hope that you're speaking kindly to yourself, especially when you look in the mirror. I love you guys. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.